Right. Let's cut straight to the chase. So I got a message this morning telling me that apparently Spike TV are not going to renew their contract with Tna Impact Wrestling, and this could really put TNA, well, it does put TNA in a very, very scary position, and it's very, very reminiscent of, in some respects to me, it's a little bit reminiscent to the WCW thing, but then there are a lot of differences, and I could touch on those if you wanted, and I will. But it looks like TNA could almost cease to exist by the end of the year if they don't get another television deal, and it's very, very scary because things are happening right now, and lots of things are happening right now, and it is quite scary. You know, right? It's scary. Look, with the things that have been going on, it's a very, very scary thing to be a wrestler right now, because if TNA does eventually go out of business, WWE are making a lot of cost-cutting measures, and that means that there will be a lot of people who won't necessarily get hired by WWE if TNA goes for the chop. Now, let's just talk about what contributed to this, because there's a lot of things that kind of went on. There's a lot of things that have gone on throughout the years. There's a lot of different theories that people have. Now, the first thing that people have always talked about, and that always has to do with Vince Russo. Vince Russo is always to blame for everything that goes on. There's no WCW, Vince Russo is to blame. WWF writing's all fault, Vince Russo is to blame. TNA went to the shit house, TNA is to, Vince Russo is to blame. Vince Russo, in this case, apparently, the whole thing with him working with TNA and like secretively working for TNA, and TNA reps apparently lying to Spike TV and saying no, he's not working with us, no, he's not working with us, keep saying it, and then Vince Russo sends the wrong email out to Mike Johnson, a wrestling journalist. That created a lot of discussion amongst our little bubble of people. Got lots of people talking. Vince Russo's lied for months about working with TNA, and now it's come out that he has. And I can understand why Spike TV would not like that. And some people are saying that that was the thing that was the straw that broke the camel's back, the whole Vince Russo thing. And I can understand that in a sense like this. In any relationship, whether it's professional or personal, you have to have a degree of trust. In business, you have to have a degree of trust. Spike TV and Impact Wrestling, or TNA, are partners. And in a partnership, you want there to be a certain amount of trustworthiness, a certain amount of professional trustworthiness. So when you're asking your partner, is this going on, and they say no, and then it really is going on, and then it comes out in a certain way where the whole world finds out at the same time as you do, I can understand from Spike TV's standpoint why they would be so pissed off, because they asked them. Apparently they have flat out asked them. Dave Meltzer is my source. TMZ apparently is the people that broke the story, which is, you know, I fucking hate those people. But the fact is, there's a lot of sources that have come out and said that apparently they lied to Spike TV about this, and I can imagine that putting a real spanner in the works with renewing a contract. Now, the other thing I want to say is, I wonder if this was a decision being made from months in advance, because as the people touched on the law, they said that Spike TV had pretty much released their full programming schedule, autumn programming schedule, and there was no mention of Impact Wrestling, and a lot of people felt that that was probably a sign from before that we just hadn't picked up on, that they were not interested in renewing that working relationship, and also the fact that they had pulled back on a lot of money and budgeting things. Obviously, I think they were footing the bill for Hogan and some other wrestlers, and I think that they were not getting enough of a return, so they kind of pulled money, or maybe it was just a general cost-cutting measure, and they thought, yeah, we can cut costs here. Either way, one will notice that a lot of changes have happened and a lot of people aren't there anymore. And I can see how that relationship began to erode, and then now with this Vince Russo thing, they're being like, what the fuck, you lied to us, and now being like, right, negotiations are ceasing right now. I can see that being part of it. For what I understand, there was a meeting last week, and they were told in person that this is going to cease. Now, the other thing about this that is interesting and strikes me is that I could see this coming in a weird way, because I did a video, and if you haven't seen it, have a look. I'll put it down below. And I did a video when UFC and TNA both got signed to Spike Television, and I had from a very reliable source that one of those purchases was a time buy, and the other one was lots of money poured into it and lots of budgets poured into it. And I automatically assumed that the UFC was the one that had all the money poured into it. In fact, it was the other way around. The UFC was the time buy. Spike TV, that deal was completely different. And as a result, like, you would have thought, oh wow, TNA have had all this money poured into them, they're going to succeed, they're, you know, helping them pay for certain talent like Kurt Angle and Jeff Hardy, you know, they're helping foot the bill for that. And then it turned out it was actually, you know, when you look at how things happened from 2005 onwards, and you look at what TNA is and what they became, and then you look at what the UFC became this huge monster. I mean, I know I've been a fan of MMA for many, many years, but I have never seen that kind of growth in such a short amount of time. It was absolutely crazy. It was like the boom that you would have expected pro wrestling to have had around that time actually all went to MMA and the UFC. And in 2006 to 2010, it was like a huge monster. Huge monster, though it's kind of died down a bit, but it's still, you know, it really broke through into a certain level that I think people thought TNA would. Whereas TNA kind of just stayed the same. And then they didn't get any better. And they just stayed the same. And they stayed the same, and then they kind of dwindled down. Then they would bring Hulk Hogan in and it would get some interest, but then it never worked out. They'd bring this guy in, but it would never work out. They'd bring that guy in and it would never work out. And there was a point in 2010 when I thought to myself, you have RVD, Jeff Hardy, Hulk Hogan, Mick Foley, Ric Flair, Sting, AJ Styles, Bobby Roode, who else? Oh God, like all these names on one roster, and you're getting ratings of 0.98. You're not getting anything higher than, you know, 1.2. You'd expect that rating over a couple of years to grow right now, and I can see them looking at that and saying, this thing isn't going anywhere. This thing isn't going anywhere. Whereas with MMA, when we dealt with MMA before, it grew and it developed. This thing is just going nowhere. What's the point? We might as well just get rid of it. And I can see them thinking that too. And that is the other problem. To me, when you look at how the UFC was marketed and how it was promoted and presented, that was the cool product. TNA just never had that identity, and I can imagine that's part of the problem. Here's my thing. If you're a truly hot commodity, if you're a truly valuable player, then TV networks are going to want to keep you. People are going to want to have you around because they want to be associated with that. And to me, with TNA, and this is how I felt, I've never felt that they had that hot period ever since they've been, you know, in existence in 2006. There was points when they were on the rise. When they first started, that X Division stuff was excellent, but that was one thing. What about the rest of the show? And then, you know, the weekly pay-per-views. But when they got to Spike TV, that looked like the year where they could have really shot up into superstardom, the whole roster. You had Samoa Joe, you had the X Division, you had Monty Brown, and it looked like they were going to really achieve something, and then they just kind of went down again. And I've heard Spike TV actually asked to have some of these WWE, ex-WWE people over there, and I think that it didn't work out. I think that kind of played a factor too. The other thing is, to me, is that when you look at TNA wrestling as a whole, as a wrestling fan, ask yourself one question. What mark, when this is all said and done, what mark did they leave on professional wrestling that you will remember for the rest of your life? That will impact, pun intended, influence wrestling in a way that, you know, is undeniable. You look at ECW, wrestling changed a lot because of ECW. It was a very different style, very counterculture kind of product, and people still talk about ECW favorably in you know, rose tinted lenses. People still talk about ECW like that. You look at WWE, they are the world leader. They have been around forever. I can go to people across my road and say WWF, WWE. They know what it is. In fact, that kind of just happened a few minutes before I started the video. People know what WWE is. You ask about WCW, and I can show images of certain wrestlers from WCW, and people know, oh yeah, the NWO, and I showed them a picture of Sting. Oh yeah, I know who that is. See, they kind of had that legacy on people. People know, you know, there's things you're associated with. With TNA, there's nothing that really comes close to that, and that's a very worrying thing. You look at back in the territory days, people remember, oh goodness, the World Class wrestling fans remember World Class and the Von Erichs and the Freebirds. That's a huge thing, and that's a huge part of the legacy of professional wrestling. You look at all of those promotions, whether it's in Japan, whether it's in Mexico, they've all had these things that they've left their mark on wrestling. And then you ask yourself, have TNA done that? And they haven't. The closest they came, again, was with the X Division, but then it never really went to where it needed to get to. Then they came close again in 2006, and to me that was the biggest opportunity that they had ever had, was when they signed Kurt Angle. And it was at a time when people were so frustrated with WWE programming, with the DX reunion and the John Cena stuff, and to me it was the time where wrestling fans who were so disenfranchised and so disillusioned with WWE and the ECW revival failure and all of that, there was a high demand for a fresh, serious alternative. And when TNA were making all the gains they were with Samoa Joe and with this different style, and then signing Kurt Angle that year, to me that should have been the year where they just blew up. And they didn't. And I can't help but feel that the mismanagement of that has done them in. I can't help but feel that, you know, bringing all these big names, not having someone who actually has a vision, someone who's ahead of the curve. See, WWE's greatest weapon is Vince McMahon. UFC's greatest weapon is Dana White. Strikeforce, when they were around, Scott Coker. There are a lot of people that just have that vision and are very smart to what they're doing. There's no one like that in TNA, and they hired a lot of people who didn't have much success, if any, working in the office. In fact, a lot of these people worked in WCW during those years, and that's worrying to me. And again, you also look at who was running the show, Dixie Carter, who, bless her heart, is a nice lady, but a nice lady isn't gonna, you know, make us. You're gonna need someone that has that vision, that isn't scared to fire people, that isn't scared to make the difficult decisions for the greater good of the company. And I feel that Dixie Carter doesn't have that, and she's just. This is horrible to say it, but it's like watching a deer in the headlights. I mean, you watch her on TV and you see her and she's like, cut those eyes. She's just like that all the time. Like, you know, like she's on happy pills or something. She's like that. And it's just like, oh my God, you don't get it. And then she did that ridiculous meeting once. Oh, I've got a lot of you telling me how to run a company, blah, blah, blah. Well, now look what's happened. I think you should have listened to some of the fans a little bit more, or just learn from previous history. You see all of these things and it's like, you know, what's that saying? The eggs have come in to hatch, or the chickens, whatever the saying is. The fact is, all the things that fans had said many years before have now come to purpose and present right now, and that is very scary. And with Spike TV basically saying, look, we're stopping your contract with you. You've got until September, October. That's worrying. That's very worrying. And I think, if anything, the biggest tragedy in all of this is the wrestlers who work there and the people who work there and the employees there, because their job status is going to be in question now, and they're going to feel very, very, the security, you know, they're going to feel very insecure right now. And if TNA does go out of business, because without television you're essentially worthless. Granted, they've got TV over here on Challenge TV and they've got, you know, television elsewhere, but without that deal in America, which sets it all off, without television, you are essentially a worthless product, because you can't run a wrestling product in this day and age that's considered mainstream without TV. And if that American deal goes, and if they can't renegotiate a deal with another channel, that's scary. And I don't know what other channels will be interested. Reminds me a bit of the ECW situation in some respects too. And it's really scary. And I mean, like, you could see all the writing on the wall when AJ Styles didn't re-sign because they couldn't afford him, when Daniels and Kazarian left because they couldn't afford him, when Sting went, when Hogan went, Kurt Angle was talking about going to the WWE. You can see these things happening now, and it's like, oh my God, this might be the very end of that promotion. And it's a sad thing. TNA never had that hot moment like WCW did. TNA never had that creative zenith success that ECW did. They never ever had that, and that's a very, very sad thing. And when you look back at what they've left, if this truly is the end, that's it. And now all these people, wrestlers, staff, all of these people that, you know, relied on this company for their income, that's very scary. And the scary thing is, now with the WWE cutting costs on the network, and things like that. I don't see a lot of people, if TNA goes out of business, I don't see a lot of people getting hired by WWE. Only a handful, with this training center and their attitudes to talent that come from other promotions. I don't know. The other option is with WWE by TNA. That would be scary, but I think we know how that would go. We've already seen it before in 2001. The thing is, though, TNA is nowhere near as big as WCW was at its heyday, and that's another thing. And that worries me. I think the only benefit really is if you're an independent promotion or an independent promoter, if TNA does fold, you've got a lot of talent now you can now use and pay and make money with and off of doing shows every couple of weekends. And Jeff Jarrett's got his promotion, Global Wrestling Force or something like that, I don't know what it's called. And I know that opens up the market for him for talent that he'll pay on the cheap and bring in. But again, Jeff Jarrett doesn't have TV that I'm aware of, but he's got a backup. He doesn't have TV, and again, it's scary. It's very, very scary. Very, very scary. And I really hope that, you know, for the employees' sake, this is not the end, but it really looks like it will be the end. And again, in a lot of ways, TNA have themselves to blame. They didn't make themselves the hot product they wanted to. They never had that creative boom. They never had that financial boom. They were always losing money, spending lots of money, no vision, no structure, bringing in people who are not necessarily the most successful people in there, bringing in sharks like Hogan and Bischoff, unfortunately, bringing in guys like Vince Russo, then lying to your partners about that. That just, man, spells the end almost. I really hope something can be salvaged, but it really does look like right now it's too late, and optimism for me isn't really as big as it usually is, because I'm usually a very optimistic person when it comes to these things. But you know, I really hope that, you know, all the employees actually get jobs, because that's scary, and I don't want to come on here and make fun of TNA, because I don't want to see people out of work. It's scary. It's a scary, scary situation if you're working there right now. And apparently there's a lot of talent that have just been talking about how fucked the company is. And I mean, it's scary. Very, very scary. And I'm going to stop right now. I'm going to upload this. If you haven't seen me before, comment, rate, subscribe. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't. Follow me on Twitter if you can remember my Twitter handle. I will share this. Everyone down at Wrestling Forums, take care. Nice to see you. I'm out. Let me know what you think. Is TNA going to be kaput, or are they going to survive? Let me know, and I will see you soon. Bye.